My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hey, Atlanta. Say hello to Small Business Help from Apple. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time for our second edition of Remember This Collapse, a very special presentation of Remember This Crap. We just did one before this with Mike Prasnowski joined Mike Donahue and myself, and we talked about collapses from 2001 to the present day. But the Cubs, I mean, they're nothing if lousy with collapses. So we're bringing on our good friend Forklift, who's going to talk to us about collapses from 1969 until when we picked up in 2001. So, guys, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited. This is the second time Fork has joined us to rehash some stuff, and I always feel like very exciting. It's like being in 1948 and talking to somebody from the Civil War. It's like, I mean, he was there. We're gonna get some firsthand exposure. We weren't even alive in '69, yeah. So
he appears in several of those Stephen Crane photos.
I was there for the very first tomato in.
When did we do 77? We did it.
We did it. We were inspired to do it when the Cubs had that weird death rattle in 21 before they eventually would get rid of right. Remember they were you were inspired because the month of May was the best May they had.
Right. They kept referring to since that 1977, and I knew that the 1977 team finished 500, and it was like, all right, well, what happened to them? And so we had to bring in our version of Ed Hardig. To enlighten. Actually, we tried to get Ed, and Ed, his mom's Wi-Fi is not great, so we got Frank instead. So.
And Ed had no stories about George Mitterwald's chewing tobacco or smuggling vodka into the ballpark.
Plus, he was not in attendance when Nick Kelleher was swinging like a chandelier from Dave Kingman.
That was so great.
So, yeah. Yeah, your first hand eyewitness account really helps augment all the pain and suffering that we try to relay. So, looking forward to it.
So should we just dive in? I feel like a good place to start is probably the 1965 or 6. What
Well,
was Leo's first year? Leo's first year was
66,
66.
the 100 loss team, right?
Yeah. So, right. Because Leo took over after he came in after that finally threw in the towel on the College of Coaches.
Thank
They
Christ.
hired Leo to manage the Cubs, and Leo, they finished 8th in 66. And
What was his
65, pardon me.
What was his?
And
Yeah,
Leo,
right.
he said this is not an 8th place team. So then they finished 10th in 66.
He's right.
And that was only their second. The Cubs had never had a 100 loss season until the 60s, and that was their second one of the 60s. But unlike the other
That
one,
is correct.
which was on the other end of the College of Coaches, at least there seemed to be a light at the end of the tunnel when they finally. At least I remember my dad would say he was so almost ready to walk away with College of Coaches. So like he was so excited when they hired Durocher because it was like shit, just at least the College of Coaches is done.
Well,
and
what's actually perversely impressive about those 200 loss seasons is those 100 loss seasons happened with 3 prime Hall of Fame hitters in the lineup.
Good point.
So you had Banks, you had Williams, you had Santo on that lineup, and Williams and Santo were Iron Men. They played 162 and in a couple of cases 163 games in a year.
And Billy, and you said that was 62 was the other 100 loss team?
Yeah, 62. The year of my birth.
Billy was the reigning rookie of the year, and they actually had a rookie of the year he wasn't,
Yeah, Ken Hubbs was rookie of the year in 62.
And they had Banks and Williams, and was Lou Brock also on that team? I know he was underachieving as a Cub, but
Brock was on that team. Brock got traded to the Cubs and got traded to St. Louis in 64.
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting. You're right. There's a lot of talent on that team, unlike the 2012 Cubs that lost 100 games. And certainly the 66 team still had that talent, but with expansion or whatever, then I don't know. It seems it's funny that they were such a disaster in 66. It was kind of one step backwards, 2 steps forward, right?
Oh, it was before the 66 season. Colin was still the general manager of the Cubs. He actually made a couple of really great trades. He traded Liddy McDaniel and Don Landrum to San Francisco for Bill Hands and Andy Huntley. And then he traded Larry Jackson and I can't remember who else, but coming back were Fergie Jenkins and Adolfo Phillips. And one of the reasons the Cubs went from 59 wins in 66 to 87 wins in 67 was because Jenkins got moved into the rotation. Jenkins was in the bullpen in 66. Jenkins went into the rotation in 67 and started off on his Hall of Fame career. So at that point, you now have 4 Hall of Famers on your roster, plus Durocher got inducted as a manager. So there was a lot of Hall of Fame credentials going on there.
Now, I know a lot of Cubs lore is that season when July 2nd when they ended the day in first place for the first time since the war. Were you at that game?
I was not. My first Cub game ever was in August of 67. I was not yet 5 years old, but my dad wanted to take me because, when we talked about 77, part of the thrill of 77 was the fact that both the Cubs and the White Sox were making noise. They both fell short, but there was this chance. Everybody had this chance. Maybe both teams win the pennant, and we have a Subway Series or whatever they would want to call it. In 67, Cubs never held first by themselves. They tied a couple times.
I just looked that up today. I never knew that till today.
And the White Sox were in their pennant race until the end of the year. There were 4 teams. There were 4 teams in the American League down to the wire until the last week of the season. You had the Red Sox, who eventually won. You had the Tigers. You had the California Angels, who they were still pretty fresh off of expansion, but they had Josie and a couple of Dean Chance. They had some really good players. And then the White Sox. The White Sox were basically carried by their pitching. They had Gary Peters, they had Joe Foreman, they had Tommy John. They did really good starting pitching. And, I don't know if Hoyt Wilhelm was in their bullpen at that point.
It's old balls.
But that was 67. So 67 was the year that you first had a glimmer of hope with the Cubs.
Oh, like you said, they were in first place. The legend was that when they won on July 2nd, and I looked it up, Jenkins was the winner, that the bleacher bums wouldn't leave until they raised the. And it didn't occur to me until today that this was still pre-division. So it was first in the National League. It wasn't first in the division. So it was it wasn't a fluke at that point. It was legit. July 2nd. They
took the flags down like they do at the end of every game, but everybody stayed, so they had to re-raise the flag. And that was in 67. Right. So 67 happens, and there's actually some optimism for the Cubs. In 68, at one point they kind of made a run, but fell short. The Cardinals were just on fire all year. And part of the thing with Durocher, too, is Durocher he didn't like the fact that there were veterans in the clubhouse that were getting more respect than he was. If you ever get read Rick Talley's book, The Cubs of 69, he actually goes into a lot of depth on this, how basically Leo resented the hell out of Ernie Banks because Ernie Banks was the identifiable face of the Cubs, and Ron Santo was basically the heart and soul of the Cubs. And so he always kind of felt like those guys were going to undermine him. So he tried to get Banks traded off the Cubs a couple of times.
What a guy.
Leo. And before the Cardinals got Orlando Cepeda, he wanted to trade Banks to the Giants for Cepeda. And then when Cepeda was on the block, and in 69, again, Durocher wanted to trade Banks for Cepeda, and there was just no way that the Cardinals wanted any part of Banks. They got Joe Torre instead. And Joe Torre wound up having a bunch of good years for the Cardinals. So now we get to 69. And 69.
The one thing I will say, you're right, about 68, the hot streak may have been there, but the one thing that I noticed, they were 9 games over was their high water mark. And I feel like from the not having been there, that it was almost like a little bit of a letdown because they never did get into first place like they did the year before, even though they were never there alone. And they were 3 games less. They won 87 games in 67, 84 and 68. You're right. The Cardinals are probably better than they were in 67, but the Cubs, I feel like, kind of evened out a little bit going into 69, which obviously is going to be a whole different story.
Yeah. Well, and in 68, they're 84 and 78, but they won their last 5.
Yeah, so, and I noticed the furthest back they were, it was on September 3rd, so it sounds a little bit late, But otherwise, probably a disappointing year after 67.
Yeah. Well, you would get something that would happen back then that you don't get now, which is players would get drafted and players would have to do military service. So
is this Kenny Holtzman's 9-0 year?
Well, no, Kenny Holtzman's 9-0 year was 67, but he was just unhittable in 67. But he would get like weekend passes from his reserve duty and come in and pitch. And he did pretty well considering the fact that he was a hard-throwing Jewish left-hander to the big leagues as Sandy Koufax was retiring. Yeah. So everybody immediately saw him as that was the thing. That was the thing. He was the Sandy Koufax you get when you go shopping at Aldi's. Not to say that Kenny Holtzman
was the dented can version of Sandy Koufax.
Yes. I mean, not to say that there was anything wrong with Kenny Holtzman. He just wasn't Sandy Koufax.
Even like the no-hitters, which he threw 2, Koufax went through 5. So he's like 40%, all across the board maybe. 3. Holtzman threw 3? Or
No.
Koufax. Koufax only threw 3?
No, Koufax threw 4. Koufax
Okay.
threw 4. Ryan threw what, 7 or 8 or something ridiculous
yes.
like that.
Holtzman had 3,
But yeah,
but only 2 at the Cubs,
no,
right?
Holtzman had 2. Yeah,
Sorry.
Holtzman had 2. The thing with his first one was it was in right field. It was against the Braves.
Yep.
The wind was howling in, and there was a ball that Hank Aaron hit that I got to ask Billy Williams at a meet and greet thing one time about that ball. Williams said the ball was out of the ballpark, and the wind blew it back in.
Hovering over Sheffield before coming back into play?
Wait, but it was in the left field well, and the ball came back in. But that was Kenny Holtzman's no-hitter. And if you look at the game log of the 1969 Cubs, that was the zenith of that season. Everything went to shit the day after Kenny Holtzman's no-hitter.
To Frank's point, just to validate that your memory is pretty spot on, Holtzman's no-hitter was on Tuesday, August 19th. According, 3 days earlier was technically the Cubs' high point of the season. 9 games over on August 16th. And after, so you're effectively, your point is pretty much spot on. After Holtzman's no-hitter, they were 8 games over, but I guess that's a perfect spot to pretty much hone in on the beginning of the end, I suppose.
Yeah, 29 games over on August 16th with a 9-game lead in the newly
29.
formed NL East.
So, right. I mean, I know you were just a kid, Frank, but it's like how bonkers it is. Here's this once proud, like in 1940, the Cubs would be like one of the top 3 brands probably still in baseball. Yankees, Giants, Cubs, Dodgers were for shit. And then flip the script 25 years later, all of a sudden they're the lovable losers. They don't even sniff the first division for 2.5 decades. You get those 3 days in 67 where they're, you taste it, and all of a sudden they're blowing the doors off the fucking league, and they're 6 weeks from the end of the season. I'm just like, in retrospect, you can just see the kick coming to the crotch, but I'm just like in real time, I'm just trying to envision what was going through like the adults' minds too. I mean, you could probably recall what your dad was going through living side by side with him, but man alive, 29 games over, 9 games in first. Holtzman throws a no-no,
and every kid had a Cub Power T-shirt and a Cub Power button, and there were Cub Power bumper stickers.
What is that? Some brick house slogan?
I don't know who. There was actually an album called Cub Power.
Was it like White Power?
Well,
was it like Men in Blue?
Were there hoods? Was Murph? Did Murph and the guys in the bleachers have yellow construction worker
he was
hoods
playing
on?
his trumpet on the bleach.
Yellow construction helmets, but they actually had a Cub Power chant that was actually basically lifted from the Black Panthers. Because the Black Panthers had a chant that ended with Panther Power. So the Cubs one ended with Cub Power.
Wow, immediately co-opting or appropriating it.
It was culture appropriation.
In real time.
Anybody knew what that was. So, but yeah, there's a Cub Power album. And please do yourself a favor, and there's got to be clips on YouTube where the Cubs sing, "We've got that pennant feeling," and all this.
Running down our leg, it turned out.
Oh, yeah.
That's where that feeling was going.
Wait, was the Righteous Brothers song was already out? Obviously, Is that what it was? A parody of that? Okay.
But, they were playing Hey, Hey, Holy Mackerel on the radio all the time. It was crazy. And
Santa was clicking his heels. Big Selma's firing up the bleacher bums.
Yeah.
Like a party like Mardi Gras.
And it's funny because Leo Durocher wound up just going with his guys. And he was basically doing he predated David Ross on the guys who got him there.
Yeah. And we made fun of Dusty for doing the same thing in 2004. Funny how that works, right?
If you want to be amazed, go to any of the 69 Cubs, with the exception of Billy Williams, and look at their month-by-month splits and look at how they hit in the month of September. I mean, these guys were not getting the ball out of the infield in September.
Oh, shit.
And Randy Huntley, I know, has talked about it in interviews where he couldn't even reach the warning track.
Well, how many games? We looked it up before, Andy. Like, I mean, Hundley, I think, on average, caught something like 140 games for about 5 years, but 69, I thought was like particularly cruel. I mean, and of course, you're dealing with the only team that's playing 81 games during the day.
Right. And in flannel uniforms.
By the way,
he only caught 151 games that year. He gave him 11 days off.
Slacker.
I mean, what kind of job do you get where you get 11 days off in the summer? Like, come on.
Just because I think the context here is important. On the day that Kenny Holtzman threw his no-hitter, the up and coming New York Mets, they walked off a win against the Giants, which was their 5th in a row, and put them 67-51. They were still 8 games back, but I bring that up because I don't think when we're done hashing this out that it's definitely a collapse on the Cubs, but it's also a case where some team just got hotter than shit. Just pointing that out.
I think at some point in late August into early September, the Cubs lost 12 out of 13.
Okay, fair enough. You still needed to have. You're right. They're still far up. But I mean, I always
still bed shitting going on.
Yeah,
they lost 11.
We're going to get to that.
They lost 11 of 12 from September 3rd to September 15th. They won once.
Yeah.
And let's see what the Mets did from September 3rd to September 15th.
Let's see. I've got the Mets up. 7, 8, 9, they lost on a walk-off.
They went 10-1.
Yeah. I mean, the Mets, as bad as the Cubs were, the Mets had golden horseshoes up their ass. Like there was one game in that run where Steve Carlton struck out 19 Mets and lost the game because fucking Ron Swoboda hit 2 two-run home runs off of him.
Jesus.
Like at that point, what do you do? But I would be amiss if I did not tell one of my all-time favorite Cubs stories.
Yes,
I know.
Let me set the stage because I don't think Andy's heard the story. I have for just Labor Day, correct? Because I think this is a game that even because you were there, and I want and you guys, but like this is a game that I think objective observers will say, well, it's in the midst of the losing streak, right? Was it Labor Day And so
right around there.
On the morning, on the morning of Labor Day, September 1st, just happened to be on was it Labor Day 69? It was the Pirates game, right?
Yeah, it was the Pirates.
Okay, so I don't know why I don't see the Pirates game on the extra. Oh, there it is. It's Sunday. It was Sunday, September 7th.
Yeah, Sunday, September 7th. Yeah.
All right. So the Cubs at that point they actually had a 5-game winning streak not too long before that, but they had lost 3 in a row coming into that game. They lost the first 2 games. They're hanging on. They have a 3.5 game lead, so it's a little scary. The Mets have come up close, but in this game, because it's been pointed to. And I'll let you take it from here. But like this is where the Cubs. It seems like the Cubs finally have one in the bag. Let's just say they take a 1-run lead into the top of the 9th inning with Phil Reagan on the mound. They're hoping to go up 4.5 because I think the Mets lost that day. So take it away, Fork.
And yeah, so at this point, it's a 5-4 ball game, and they got Phil Reagan in to close it out. And Regan was the guy that Leo leaned on heavily that year. He was like they didn't have closers in the classical sense that we know them now, but he would bring in Regan late in games.
And Jerome Holtzman hadn't made up his phony baloney stat yet.
They did at the beginning of that year, I think. And actually, Reagan had come in to start the 8th, or he came in, I think, he was already in the game, like in the 8th inning. And he actually gets Moises Alou's uncle Matty to pop out to start the inning, and then Gene Alley hits a grounder back to Reagan.
I want to step on Frank's story. I'm going to get out of the way, but the Cubs had just taken the lead in the bottom of the 8th on a Jim Hickman homer. So Wrigley's in estrus. They're very excited.
Oh yeah,
because they're going to win now. They've pulled this one out of the fire. All we got to do is get 3 outs and we win.
The losing streak is over. We're gonna cruise now. Fuck the Mets. We're gonna hard fought win. We're gonna go all the way now.
And there were 2 years there, 69 and 70, where there was no better feeling in the world than a close game with Jim Hickman at the plate. He came through every single time. He was incredibly clutch. Like
the Aramis Ramirez of the 69 Cubs.
It was insane how good he was at late inning home runs or just big late inning hits. So, I'm not quite 7. I was going to turn 7 actually 3 weeks after this game. But, I've been watching the Cubs all year. I've been watching baseball all year. And Stargell comes up and
2 outs.
Yeah, 2 outs, Stargell's up, and I say, oh no, Stargell's going to hit a home run. Stargell's going to hit a home run. And my dad, who is clearly where I inherited my gift of prognostication, says to me, don't worry about it. The wind's blowing in. Regan's pitching. Babe Ruth couldn't hit one out. The words are barely out of his mouth and the ball is on Sheffield Avenue. And as Stargell's rounding the bases and you just feel the life get sucked out of the ballpark, this little Mexican dude who was sitting right behind us leans in like between our heads and just goes, bet you wish Babe Ruth was playing today. So the rest of the time that my father was alive, that was like our code. How'd the Cubs do today? Babe Ruth didn't play. That meant the Cubs lost.
Legend is born. I mean, that's an iconic game. And I only want to point something out that the game wasn't over. And Andy, I don't know if you have the game up.
I have it up.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if you do, I would love for you to scroll to the bottom of the 10th and tell the fans, the listeners at home, how that inning went.
All right. So is it Lou Marone or Lou Maroney? I guess Marone. It's an E. Is pitching for the Pirates. Billy Williams doubles to lead off the inning. Ron Santo is intentionally walked. They bring up Willie Smith.
Bring in the double play.
Yeah, Willie lines into a double play.
How?
Then they...
No, but how? I'd like to dwell on this point here. The winning run's at second base.
It says line drive double play third to first.
What the fuck is Santo doing is my point.
Oh.
Jesus Christ, his run is meaningless. Like Billy Williams, what are you like? How are you not stable? This guy that showed up, Don Young, that season, like would lose his shit. The same guy that was a broadcaster in 1998 insisted on the team consoling him, the broadcaster, when Brant Brown dropped the fly ball. I'm sorry, you know how I feel about Santo, Hall of Fame player, but what really, you dumbass. Like they could still have won that game. Is my point.
Well, who is managing the 69 Pirates? I guess I gotta look.
Is it Murtaugh?
Because
look at Murtaugh.
Because look at what he does. Look at what he does with now. You've got 2 outs and nobody on because of the double play.
Yep.
Well, no.
Wait a minute. Where are we?
Yeah, you're right. He intentionally walks the next hitter after Santo.
Well, he intentionally walks Jim Hickman.
Yeah.
He's like, fuck that dude. We already hit a home run on us. We'll just put him on. We'll put the tying run. We'll let Randy Hundley be the tying run. We'll just walk Hickman. It doesn't make any sense. He can hit a home run. It doesn't matter.
Actually, it was Larry Shepard was manager of the Pirates.
Oh, wow. Really? Okay, because
I
they
think
won
they
the
brought
World
Murtaugh.
Series 2 years later.
Yeah, they brought Murtaugh back.
Because he was their manager in 60 also, I thought, right? Maybe not.
Oh, wait, no, the game's
Maybe
still
not.
tied. Oh, yeah, so, because this is the 10th. In a tie game, he walks Jim Hickman.
Well, of course he did. Because, like Forklift was saying, he was a clutch hitter. And now that dumbass left first base
I like
open.
that.
That's another thing I
wish
had to
managers would do shit like that more now. They're all afraid to do that.
I don't know.
Did you see in the so the Pirates scored twice? I mean, I don't know if this is Pirates twice. Pirates scored twice in the 11th. Did you know that a 1984 Cub drove in the final run for the Pirates?
Who would that be, Frank? Supposedly he was a Cub killer when he was a Pirate. According to my brothers. I don't know. But yeah, he was the pinch hitter extraordinaire in the 84 Cubs. Probably his last stop in the majors. But he was an everyday player for the Pirates.
Richie Hebner.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hebner was a Cub killer.
Yeah.
Although
that's what
all through the 70s, anybody in a Pirates uniform was a Cub killer. Rennie Stennett went 7 for 7 against the Cubs.
Another game you were at, right?
Oh
yeah. Thank you, Chicago Public Schools, for having a teacher strike. I got to enjoy a 22-0 game.
Without looking over your shoulder for a truant officer, you mean?
I looked old when I was 12. The truant officers always walked past me.
So
besides, I was a little alcoholic. I was up. They were sneaking me beer. So I'd be sitting there. I'd be there 14 years old drinking beer in the bleachers. They thought I was an adult.
Getting buzzed, watching who like Whitey Lockwood make the trip out to the mound.
Whitey or Jim Marshall or
that's I've heard that story before. I'm very happy to hear it again. It is an iconic game, and it really was. Like the 2 points here, you mentioned it, like Holtzman's no-hitter. That's the acme. And then it felt like they had a chance to maybe put the brakes on, although who knows? They win that game. Maybe the Mets are unstoppable, but regardless, they didn't. So
that's right smack dab in the middle of the 11 or 12.
Is that what it is? Okay, yeah. So
because
they went to New York after that for 2 and lost both.
Yeah, I think one of those was the Black Cat game, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the remarkable thing about this collapse isn't just the fact that the Cubs blew a 9-game lead on August 16th. It's the fact that they ended up 8 games out, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how does a first-place Cub team in 1969 on the Sunday of Labor Day draw 28,000 people? Where the hell were they? The Bears? Must have been a Bear game.
Oh, the Bears are 69. The 1-13. The what would be the 1-13?
Sorry, can't watch our first place baseball team. Got to go watch the Bears.
They're clearly on the road because I believe that was their second to last year at Wrigley Field.
Yeah, they were still playing at Wrigley then.
Or did they play?
Interesting.
Or did the Cubs have to play that at like 7:00 in the morning so they could get off the field? Bears are going to need the field, guys. So let's hurry up.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
I wonder about that's a good call. Like, how could they not sell out Wrigley that day? Maybe they did want us. They could watch the Bears on TV. I reckon
the Friday game only had 10,000 people.
As I recall, it was a pretty crummy weather that day. As I recall,
you said the wind was howling in. You said the wind was howling in from the lake. Was howling in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were there, so you did your part.
But.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the Tuesday night game. Actually, no, I can't remember. Actually, what might have been that Monday night game was the game where Bill Hands drilled Tommy Agee to start the game.
Really,
and then Kuzman. The first batter up for the Cubs the next inning was Santo, and Kuzman drilled Santo, and all the Cubs just sat in the dugout.
Oh, now here's what I'll see is that he must have thrown inside to Agee because Agee started off grounding out to Santo to start the game and a 2-2 pitch. However, Agee later fucking homered against Hands in the third. So, but that's an interesting. So you're saying that a little bit of an inside,
right?
The Mets were chippier, and the Cubs were already like.
Yeah, so I think he buzzed Agee he buzzed AG, and then Kuzman drilled Santo. And I mean, he drilled him. And Santo was apparently completely. Santo said he had no idea he was going to get thrown at.
You're absolutely right. It's on the first pitch too, top of the second.
Yeah.
Right after AG was buzzed, Santo got plunked, and then Kuzman struck the next three guys out too. Banks, Hickman, and Hundley. Wow, that's some jujitsu, motherfuckers. Tommy AG, God, so much pain. I really do feel bad. You know, the AG hits a homer. It's New York. It's this expansion team. They got that stupid apple that probably pops up. Like they came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they have these awesome pitchers.
There yet? The apple wasn't there yet.
All right, good. My dad used to reference this dude named Al Weiss.
Had AG and Al Weiss, who had both been on the White Sox, and they got traded away because they weren't producing for the White Sox. AG was Rookie of the Year and didn't really do much after that. Al Weiss was, he was Al Weiss. Yeah, but there were 2 games in Wrigley in the summer that year, 2 consecutive games where Al Weiss hit home runs, and those might have been his only home runs of the regular season.
Yeah,
and then he hit one in the World Series.
Did he really? Off the vaunted Baltimore pitching staff.
Yeah,
it was. I can see how deeply embedded my dad's hatred and everybody else was towards the Mets from that season. It just seemed like you're right about the horseshoe. Right. Felix Millan, was he on that team or was he on that later Mets team?
No, he was on the Braves.
Okay.
Was Chico Escuela on that team?
Was Chico?
Probably after that.
And it was funny because that was the first year of divisional play. So right off the bat, as a kid, you get they had the little map in the newspaper with where all the teams were, and like these are the teams in the East and these are the teams in the West, and you don't have to be a
San Diego is. You've never heard of it before, but they have a team now. Is that what they were doing?
Right. Well, and part of it too was you don't have to be a cartographer to say, hey, Cincinnati and Atlanta are both east of Chicago and St. Louis.
Yeah, that was always a thing that the Braves and the Falcons, were in the West Division, and they were east of like most of the cities. So I quickly did look up Al Weiss. Fork, you will be very pleased to learn that yes, Al Weiss literally had 2 home runs in 1969, and they were in back-to-back days against the Cubs, July 15th and 16th. And one of them at Wrigley, and they're both Mets victories in July. So that was like an annoying Mets team that's like, what the fuck are they doing here? The first one was a 1-run Mets victory too. So the second one was a 9-5 victory, but contributed. And probably at the time you're like, it's July, they're just a nuisance. After that game, the Mets were 50-37, but the Cubs were 58-35.
Yeah, So we talked about it on August 16th. From August 16th, the Cubs went 17-26. The Mets went 38-11.
Yeah, that's why they won by 8. So even if the Cubs didn't collapse, they may have lost the division by a game or whatever. Kind of like the 2018 Cubs, where they didn't really collapse. Well, we talked about it, so they did, but the Brewers couldn't fucking lose. So,
right, and so. That was 69. So for 1970, because 70 is another year we got to talk about a little bit, at least a little bit, because they basically they don't completely run it back because they actually they tried to get like a real honest to goodness center fielder. They got Johnny Callison from the Phillies, but they traded away a guy that Durocher loved, who was Oscar Gamble.
Ooh.
And they traded Oscar Gamble because the Wrigleys were not happy with the fact that he had white girlfriend.
Yeah.
Get out. Okay. Well, that seems like a common theme.
That was a precursor to Bill Madlock.
The 70 Cubs did have a 5-game, their highs. They were 5 games out on June 13th. They were 10 games over, so not quite, but they were, certainly in contention, right?
Yeah,
10 games over on June 20th, and their biggest lead was 5 on June 13th. So, And they were
Right,
never more
and-
than 6 games behind, which didn't happen until the end of the season.
Right. And there was another game late in the year where Stargell hit a resounding home run off Phil Regan.
Really? At
Yeah.
Wrigley, or is this one in Pittsburgh?
At Wrigley. 2 years in a row, Stargell put one on to Sheffield off Phil Regan to flip a game.
Wow. I may have found it. Yeah, top of the ninth. All right. September 12th, 1970. Cubs are 75 and 68 going in. They have a 2-run lead. All right, no, what is it? They're winning. No, they were actually losing, but Stargell pretty much iced the game, I think.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, I just remember.
Well, and it was made more bittersweet by the fact that so Stargell hits a 2-run homer to make it a 2-1 game to 4-1. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then Bob Robertson hit a homer, but Jim Hickman did hit a 3-run homer in the bottom of the ninth. So they lost by 1. So somewhat similar. And it was another tough game because the Cubs where were they in the standings at that point? The 19th, 70 Cubs. That was they were actually only a game out after that. Even they were a game out coming into that game and then 2 out after that game. So fucking Stargell.
Right. So yeah, the Cubs were kind of giving a tease, like maybe they can sneak in.
Well, yeah,
and
the Pirates won with 89 wins.
Yeah.
So Cubs had won 92 the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Interesting.
But they only won 84 and 70. During this run from 67 to 72, they only won 90 games once, just in 69. 87, 84, 92, 84, 83, 85.
Yep.
Interestingly, the 71 Cubs were their high point above 500 was higher than it was in 70. They were 13 games over at one point on August 20th. However, the 71 Cubs never were in first place. So, these are the types of teams that were unfamiliar to like Andy and I until recently, where they would actually be over 500 for multiple years in a row, even if they weren't that good.
The other season, which it wound up being like the last year of the Durocher Cubs, was 73. And that was when they did what they started to do a lot of later in the 70s, which was just roar out of the gate, build up like a 5 or 6 game lead, and by the end of July they were out. And even
the 73 Cubs had an 8.5 game lead on June 29th.
Yeah.
And they were 16 over on that date, which was also their high water mark. So,
and that was a really terrible Mets team that won the division that year. The Cubs were in contention up till like the last week of the season. Just looking here, September 21st, they were 2.5 games out and 500 to let you know how great the 72 season was.
Wow.
And that 73 Mets team then beat the Reds in the playoffs and took the A's to 7 games.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Yogi Berra was their manager. But that was the LCS where Pete Rose and Bud Harrelson got to fisticuffs, right? That's one of the few times the Reds didn't advance.
In the World Series, Willie Mays lost, I think, 2 fly balls in the sun.
Yeah, and my dad always talked about how you always talk about Mays and DiMaggio, right? DiMaggio quit at his prime, like what he probably could have produced for a few years because he was a vain asshole. And then Mays just didn't know when to hang him up, and then there he was floundering around that World Series. Site.
Well, Willie might have wanted to make a little money. He didn't have the Mr. Coffee money.
Right.
The Mets were going to pay him. He was going to play.
And that kind of closed the chapter then, right? 73, that's it.
So 73 wasn't Durocher, though, right? That was Whitey Lockman.
Oh shit!
No, Durocher. Well, maybe 73. Was 73 the year Durocher got fired? He got fired midway through the season.
Must have been 72.
Well, that's 72. Okay. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, Woody Lockwood actually gave him a bit of a dead cat bounce
39 went all Mike Quaddy on him, 39 and 26.
Yeah.
Leo was 46, 44, and 1.
Was Leo off entertaining women in Lake Lawn Lodge that year? Was that the year that he took his week off?
No, that was
69,
Camp
right?
And that was the 69.
Good.
Like, what a jag-off.
So here's a guy who notoriously ran those players into the ground, made them play every day. But he got to fuck off for a week and go to Wisconsin.
Just a historic asshole. Like, highly successful, whatever. It's super competitive. You know, a little bit of, in the crosshairs of history with the Giants and Dodgers, the 30s and 40s. Babe Ruth hated his balls, by the way. I mean, because he was a teammate of Ruth's, right? Ruth accused him of stealing his wallet or some shit. He had no scruples.
And then
is it Ruben Rivera? He's stealing guys' gloves.
Mariano's brother. Yeah.
And it came out much, much, much later that the 51 Giants were stealing signs.
Yeah.
With Herman Franks and the center field bleachers doing all flash signs.
Yeah, for a while the Cubs had Bob Buell doing it, and it didn't do them any good. They still suck. During the College of Coaches, one of the coaches had Bob Buell working on stealing signs.
Well, say whatever you want about Whitey Lockman, but he never got to appear on the Donna Reed show, Mr. Ed and the Beverly Hillbillies. And Leo got to do all of that.
What a character. Fucking Durocher, Jesus. You better or worse, I guess.
So,
it almost seems like a Ditka quality where, like, they had all this talent and he was able to whip them into shape. But, unlike Ditka, he didn't reach the summit and then kind of outlived his welcome.
My theory with Durocher was he was always successful when he had teams that had guys that were more role players. And here he had a team full of stars, so he just figured he'd put his best players on the field every day and not think about tomorrow. The one time he won the World Series with the Giants was 1954, and everybody remembers Willie Mays' catch, but the actual hero of that World Series for the Giants was a pinch hitter named Dusty Rhodes, who I think hit 3 home runs in a 4-game sweep.
Wow.
So I think Leo was a better manager.
That's just ironic. He's using his bench in the World Series. He couldn't even use it for the 69 Cubs.
Yeah. No, and Paul Popovich hit 300 that year. And, the most playing time he got was early in the season in 69 because Beckert jammed his thumb. There was like a tag play or something, and Beckert jammed his thumb. He was out for about 3 weeks. And he said, later on, he said that he came back too soon. His thumb wasn't fully healed. Because Beckert he was a good second baseman, and he was an exceptional slap hitter. He would choke up on the bat and just poke the ball over infielders. And was 71 or 72? He hit almost 340 doing that.
Damn.
And he was the guy before Bill Buckner, who was the Cub that just nobody could strike out.
Yeah. So, Mike and I grew up, after this, and heard all the, the glorious tales of the 69 Cubs and that era of Cubs. And, when you look at what they did, they were good, but they weren't that good. Like I said, they only won 90 games once. And I can kind of see why when Dallas Green came, he was like, all right, it's enough of glorifying these guys that didn't win shit. Man, that's half your problem, is you were just wallowing in these glory days that weren't nearly as glorious as you'd like them to be. And the ironic thing is the Cubs have a current ownership who seems to still be infatuated with them. They're all the fucking statues.
I know.
You know, and I don't begrudge Billy Williams or Ron Santo or Ernie Banks, those guys, but it's like, move on. You actually had a team that won the World Series. The thing they never did. Maybe maybe those are the guys you should be making a bigger deal out of now. You know, and obviously they have incredible individual accomplishments. You know, there's all those Hall of Famers on that team in that run, so you can see why people liked them. But it's like they get a lot of credit for
underachieving,
being just pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean, as a team, individually, they were excellent. Obviously they weren't enough. You know,
well, and the ships crossing the night is that, like, yeah, technically 4 Hall of Famers, but Banks was kind of cooked by 69, right? He drove in 100 runs, right?
He drove in 100 runs because guys were just always on base.
Yeah. So he was well past his prime, but like Santo was absolutely in his prime. Williams was definitely still in his prime. They had 2 Hall of Fame offensive players in their prime. Jenkins and
Hickman was an absolute monster in 70, and he had a really good year in 69 also.
Yeah. So,
you know, Jimmy Hickman, he of the throw to, or no, he hit the ball that drove Pete Rose into Ray Falk.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I knew that. What I didn't know, and to Fork's point, Jim Hickman in 1970 had an OPS of 1.001.
Nice.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. He murdered the ball in 70.
Damn. 115 ribby.
Yeah, and at some point in 70 is when I think the Cubs got Joe Pepitone also.
He was on the 6th. Yeah, he was 70 was his first season. Yep.
Yeah.
234 plate appearances off the bench. 811 OPS.
And to the point of going back to between Banks being cooked and what I said earlier about Durocher hating Banks, one of the things that Durocher would do is, like, if Nolan Ryan were going to start for the Mets, Banks was in the lineup instead of Hickman. He wanted to make sure Banks struck out 4 times because he'd never catch up to that fastball.
Wow.
Nice.
Was he just like in the way? Is that what it was? It wasn't personal. Banks was like Banks like past his prime, and he's like this icon for this shitty team, and he's not even the best player on the team.
How much of it too was, I would think Ernie's personality would grate on a guy like Leo. The Mr. Happy, everything's all right all the time, kind of mindless platitudes about shit all the time. I could see it just driving Leo nuts. And then when I envision Ernie, because thanks to Marquee and the fact that they won't pay for the rest of the rights to their own library or video library. We only see Ernie hit the 500th home run over and over and over again. Right. I see him and the way, he's 40, he was almost a 40-year-old man, but it reminds me of Walter Payton describing Richard Dent's ass as saying he's the only guy in the league who has to reach over his shoulder to get his wallet out of his pants. That was kind of Ernie. Like, his ass is basically his shoulders by that point. And it is too bad they can't dig up some actual footage so we could see this incredibly dynamic, like a shortstop who was so far ahead of his time, he was practically from another planet.
I brought this up to like my dad used to always say that in the 40s and 50s, like P.T. Wrigley, he was not a good baseball man, but he knew how to market the ballpark and the team, and he was like the anti-Bill Wirtz in that he obviously put the games on TV, but they were on the 4 channels apparently in the 40s and 50s, not just WGN. So he's flooding the market. With
WGN would tape over ball games.
How do we not have like Ernie Banks at shortstop? I don't think I've ever seen footage. I've seen like fucking like Pie Trainer, or maybe not. Like I've seen guys from the 30s like in live video footage. I've never seen Ernie Banks make a goddamn toss across from shortstop. Now that I think about it,
I've seen photographs and that's it.
Yeah.
And if you want to see how he swung the bat as a young man, you can find his episode of Home Run Derby on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's
but.
It's not even unfortunate. It's tragic to have a player who literally reinvented he reinvented the position so much that nobody could duplicate it until like A-Rod. I mean, he was just that far ahead.
Yep.
And we don't have hardly any way to experience it.
he's banging out like 42 homers. Where like little shit across town, Louis Aparicio is like getting all these plaudits for batting like 250 and like whatever.
Well, it's funny. It reminds me of like Praz asking us because we were going on about Sean Dunston, mostly me because I love Sean, and he's looking at his numbers. He's like, ooh. He's asking us like, what the hell? And I'm like, you don't understand shortstops when we were kids.
Yeah,
were these emaciated little like Larry Boa
Even
was like
even
big
after Banks
at shortstop.
Yeah. Johnny LeMaster and Mark Belanger and all these
motherfuckers. In the late 60s, early 70s, Boston had Rico Petrocelli.
Okay.
And Rico, I think Rico hit 40 one year.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, your standard shortstop, you had Mark Belanger, Don Kessinger, Bud Harold.
Yeah.
All these guys that weighed 160
Tim Foley.
pounds wet. Tim Foley. Tim Foley with those fucking glasses of his, he looked like the guy that you went to high school with, and he was a dick, but he was the first guy to get a car, so you hung out with him anyway. That was Tim Foley. Fuck Tim Foley. But
he didn't spell his last name right.
So yeah, you have all these banjo hitting shortstop and Concepcion, and these were the guys.
Another one, and he was the best.
They were the best of the best, and Freddie Patek, and these.
Another one.
All non-hitting shortstops. And
I feel like between what you said,
the two that changed it were Ripken and Yount.
I was going to say, you kind of go before you mentioned Petrocelli, you almost go from Banks to Ripken and Yount. I guess you're right because Yount's. But yeah, there's another like Banks was like an anomaly because that shortstop before them weren't like Phil Rizzuto. It was like the same shit before Banks, and then like outside of Petrocelli, it seems like it went back to being shortstops being just stick figures. But you're right. Yount is it's kind of an underrated example because I always think of Ripken, who won the Rookie of the Year in '82, but like Yount was a 19-year-old like 3 years earlier. That was, in fact, Yount was the MVP in '82. Now that I think about it, as a shortstop.
But I always remember it was so crazy to me that when A-Rod hit his 40th home run with the Mariners, I don't even know what year that was, that the list of shortstops who had hit 40 home runs in a season was still two guys. It was just him and Ernie. Nobody else had done it. And Ernie had done it like a half a century before. It was almost like it wasn't even.
See?
Yeah, A-Rod did it in '98. When did Ernie do it? 54?
Well, he was MVP in 58 and 59.
58, 59.
So I'm going to get.
So those were the 2 years. So 40 years.
Fuck Leo.
In '69, Petrocelli hit 40, but
you're right. I guess you're right. It was 3.
Maybe his third base though. Oh yeah, okay. Or
no,
like
I think there probably was a third guy.
You're just misremembering, Andy.
On purpose, because fuck Rico Petrocelli.
Well, here for a position it says 6 and 5. So
there you go.
Yeah, he might not have hit all 40 as a shortstop.
Got it.
But because that Red Sox team, they won the pennant in '67. Their big bats were George Scott, Petrocelli, Yastrzemski, and Canigliaro.
Canigliaro was on that team?
He got beamed that season.
Okay.
He got beamed that season. But anyway, so you had Whitey Lockman for a few years, and then Jim Marshall, then Herman Franks. And that was when you'd have your June swoon years. So they'd roar out of the gate, and about midway through June, they would just run out of gas.
Even like in like 74 and 75, which I've always like assumed were just like bleak seasons from beginning to end.
Well, what was really funny for a couple of those years.
Oh yeah, 74 team won 77 games, so they weren't like total ass.
74 was the last year with Billy Williams, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at 73.
74.
They were 60. That was a 96 loss team, so I don't think they were in that discussion.
No, 74 was the last year with Jenkins, and one of Jenkins's last starts, I don't know who he got taken out of the game, and he was throwing bats onto the field. He was George Bell before George Bell.
Andre Dawson.
He was Dawson before Dawson. George Bell was the best part of that video for me.
He was the guy that was like trying to get Essien out there.
He was in the next circle. He looked at Dawson. He looked at Essien. He looked at Dawson. He looked at Essien. And sure somebody said, "You gonna go get your superstar before he's suspended for a month?"
Yeah.
Yeah, the 75 Cubs that bounced back with 75 wins. They did have a 4-game lead, their high point on Tuesday, May 13th.
Yeah.
And they were 10 games over 500 2 days later on the 15th. So as far as collapses go, bit of a mouse fart, but yeah, they were totally horrible. But 76, I think those are the years you're talking about. It was almost identical. Same thing, 76. Oh, they never led. Sorry. And they were 3 games over on April 14th. They just somehow managed to be mediocre all year and go to a 75-87 record.
That was when the Sporting News had the Cubs M squad on the cover. And
Not the Latin Connection? I'm sorry, I'm thinking Baseball
the
Digest.
Latin Connection was Baseball Digest. And that was a couple of years later. That was DeJesus and Trio.
Yep.
But no, the M squad was Morales, Monday, and Madlock.
In 76?
76.
Yeah, because Monday was gone in 77, but that was Morales' All-Star year in 77.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Which I think we talked about at great length when we dedicated a whole episode to 77. That team had, that really epitomizes collapse in some ways, the 77 team, because they had a lot of All-Stars, guys that a lot of guys probably never heard of at this point. We did, but
they had a bunch of guys that got on heaters, but those mid-70s teams, what used to be funny was every year, the second half of the year, Ray Burris would just catch fire. And then there was one year where he won like 10 games in the first half. We're like, okay, here we go. And then he fell apart in the second half. But let's get out of the quagmire of the Durocher Cubs.
All right, so I got one more stat before we move on. Because while I'm Googling, I found this. This is Christopher Kampka tweeted this out a couple of years ago. He goes, this is the list of 40 home run season by National League shortstops when Ernie Banks retired. And it's Ernie in 55, 57, 58, 59, and 60. And then he said, it is still the entire list. No National League shortstop has hit 40 home runs other than Ernie
holy
Banks.
shit.
So
Incredible. Wow.
Dansby around the clock.
You got to start letting him bat from second base, I think, if he's going to hit 40. They don't pay him to play offense. $170 million. But no, it's Surfers Club. So where do we go next then? Do we go to 77 for a brief
Well,
stop?
again, if for a deep dive, there's you could just go to Spotify and Google or search for
right on the post here.
1977 Cubs. I'm sure it'll be one of the top hits. Because who else is talking about the 77 Cubs? But I just for posterity, I do want to note they were fucking 25 games. I know we talked about it in that episode, but again, they were 25 games over on June 28th. I'm pretty sure that outside of 69, none of those Durocher era teams were 25 games over at any point. So
their last day in first place was August 6th.
Yeah, and what was their high point? What was first place lead? 8.5 on June 29th.
Yeah.
8.5.
Yeah, it took a little while for the Phillies to realize they were the Phillies.
And 77, right? Because the Phillies at that point, they were defending. I believe they were they won their first division in 76. It used to always be like Pittsburgh, I felt like, that would lose to the Reds. And then Philly lost the Reds in 76. But you're right, that was the beginning of their dynasty. So they ran past the Cubs before losing to the Dodgers. And that team, the Cubs finished 20 games out. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
First place on August 6th, and you finished 20 games out of first place. Good hustle. It's hard to do that.
Definitely a collapse, but also a team that nobody really took. It's hard to say that. Fork, you were there. I know we talked about it, and I'm sure you could go back. But 25 games over in late June, you had to believe, right?
Oh, yeah, we did. And, it just everybody stopped hitting and,
I love that the high water mark was right before the All-Star game where they got to send, all the I think of Jerry Morales, but there are probably other.
Madlock was there.
deservingly. Madlock, no, right? Was he on the 77 team? Okay. Was he? I think he was gone.
No, he was 74, 75, 76. No, they had that fucking Bobby Mercer.
And Steve Ontiveros and his
Manny Trio,
hairline,
Jerry
his hairline
Morales,
creations wig.
Rick Russell, Bruce Sutter.
Well, I think I mentioned this on the 77 episode. I think I mentioned this on the 77 episode that Steve Ontiveros got hit in the face with ground balls fairly often, and certainly often enough that the
Steve, knock it out your chest, not your nose.
That the organist at Wrigley Field, whose name was Vance Fothergill, and did the most amazing rendition of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" I've ever heard, by the way. But Vance would actually play the theme from Rocky when Ontiveros came up to bat.
Wow.
But he would do like this Vegas-y "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Nice. Vance.
It was unbelievable. It was so great.
All right. So
interestingly,
I was going to say, so if that's our 1977 layover, then we are off to the 1985 Chicago Cubs.
Yep.
And
yeah,
after the agonizing end to the 84 season, which the 80 we did a whole thing on it.
Yeah.
On the 84.
We're both at basketball camps during the 13-game losing streak.
Yeah, in the 85 Cubs. But I was going to say a minute for the 84 Cubs.
Oh.
Just an amazing season. I do feel like the 84, we remember the 84 season more fondly than we remember like the 2003 season. The 03 season, the postseason, the last 3 games seems to basically ruined everybody's memories.
They were somehow particularly more jarring than the last 3 losses in 84 somehow, even with the Garvey homer. Somehow.
The thing with 84 was that was the first time since an atomic bomb was dropped on Japan that the Cubs were in the postseason.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, 39 years.
As Steve Goodman put it.
Yep, that's right.
But so yeah, that was the big thing then. That was the first time.
Yeah, it was crazy.
For like 2 generations. My father became a Cub fan in '46, so he never saw the Cubs in the postseason.
Just missed the boat. Yeah.
He just missed the boat, and
now what's interesting too is that Frank, if I could, in '84, you were no longer living in Chicago. Probably really grateful the Cubs still didn't have lights, and they were on cable, I guess. And right. I mean, you were able to follow them.
They were on cable, and I was able to like go into a bar because I was working like a second shift gig at that point, so I was able to go into a bar near my house that had a satellite dish. I could watch the Cubs play and then go to work.
Oh, that's right. You were in Staten Island. You probably didn't have cable in the city in '84,
no,
right?
Staten Island did not have cable.
You still needed a
dish.
Yeah.
That was great too, because that was back when dishes were still pretty new, and you would have, I don't know if you guys remember, in college basketball games, they would have this thing called Packer on the Dish. Before the official CBS broadcast would take place, Billy Packer would actually do a little show that only people with satellite dishes could watch.
Right. Good for Billy.
So they would switch on the WGN, and you could get the raw feed sometimes before the game started. And unfortunately, a lot of times you would just get whatever was on WGN before the Cubs were on. Every so often you get a raw feed, and that was great. But I kept waiting for like some drunken ramble from Harry, but that never happened.
We got our we had to get a satellite dish because grew up on a farm, and I think we got ours in '87. But the first spring after we got it, the GN was doing a spring training game, and we got a live feed of Harry. It was great. It was Harry and Arnie basically panning. The camera is panning the crowd, looking for broads with big cans, and Harry is basically deciding whether or not they are worthy of being cut to before a half inning. It was amazing. Hey! And then Harry's spotting them and trying to direct Arnie to get the camera to the right spot. Oh, no, the third baseline. Oh, it's about 6 rows back. No, not her. Her. Yeah, that one. It was great.
Jesus.
It was the best.
That sounds like I got to meet Harry in his bar one night, and that was pretty much it. I was with a friend, and he had his wife with him, or a girlfriend at the time, whatever, and she was very pretty, and that's what got Harry's attention. So we were able to buy him a beer, and told the stories for about 20 minutes. So anyway,
like you said, they come out of nowhere, first playoff in 39 years, and now it's like all of a sudden there's demand in Wrigleyville. All of a sudden it's a destination. Cubs have Rick Sutcliffe on opening day. It's like we have a young shortstop replacing the decrepit matchstick figure that's Larry Boa, and they get off to a good start. And on June 11th, Brian Dayette, when they traded Henry Cotto and picked up Ray Fontenot and Ryan Dayette, absolutely.
Yeah,
this team is prime. They're prime, and they got off to a good start, like you said. So the high point, like from June 6th to June 11th, they had a 6-game winning streak. We talked about it in 85. Just to quickly recap, I just remember on the Monday, June 10th game, it was on Monday Night Baseball in Montreal. And they came back on Jeff Reardon, whose nickname was the Terminator. And Tim McCarver made it a point to say that after the Cubs torched his ass, he was the exterminator. Hey, Tim, not bad. They won again the next night.
Don't they do this? Don't exterminators and terminators do the same thing?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. Yeah, it was it sounded clever at the time.
Yeah, well.
I don't even know if Howard Cosell would have been in the booth there. Monday Night Baseball was a thing. It was never as popular as Monday Night Football, but
Tim took a lot of foul balls off the mask. So.
I distinctly remember. So that was Monday, June 10th. And then the next night, the Cubs win again, June 11th. They're 35-19. They're 4 games up. And, we're starting to get cocky. We won it the year before. And then they would lose the last 2 of that series to take a 4-game split. And then the Cardinals would come to town. I mean, basically, this is the start of the 13-game winning streak. I'm just going to say that I remember how angry my dad was at Ron Rappaport, sometimes writer, because at the end of that 13-game losing streak, Ron Rappaport was like saying how no team that had ever lost this many games in a row had ever finished 500. We're like, fuck that. They might not make the playoffs. You can't tell me they're not going to finish 500 because at the beginning of the 13-game losing streak, they were 35-19. At the end of it, they were 35-32, and then they would, of course. By the end, you'd have guys like Jay Baller making their debuts and Dave Engel. They were a 77-win team, mediocre, but for a team that was that high, flying that close to the sun in mid-June, and had, coming on the heels of a division championship in the first postseason appearance in 39 years.
And they have the entire rotation collapse. Was on the DL at once, right?
At one point.
Which didn't make any sense considering, Sutcliffe was Adonis, basically. Nobody took better care of themselves than Rick. And Dennis Eckersley, clean living. Nothing going on with Eck.
Same with Steve Trout.
Yeah. It's not like, when did Steve fall off the exercise bike? Was that year?
That was it. It may have been 85, 80. Who knows?
Who could have seen any of it coming?
Not even new acquisition Larry Sorensen and his missing second R could shore up the starting rotation.
He had all the R's he needed.
It was weird. They plummeted, and it was like then we talked about it with Prez the other day, like until for years between when we started coming into consciousness in the 1980, let's say, they would make these random playoff appearances and then just go back to sucking, which they did in 85, and the 86 was horrible. 87, 88, they rise back up in 89, but they weren't really collapsing at all. They were either bad or they were good, and they made the playoffs. Until unless there are any other points in 85 that we want to pick over, it was a pretty obvious collapse when you have a 13-game losing streak in mid-June. I don't know. I can't remember much else from that season after that.
When did they give up? When do we think they gave up on the season? Was it when? I gotta look this up real quick. Was it August 13th, 1985, when Dallas finally said, "All right, we're out of," when he released Larry Boa? Was that, the signal to the fans that it's over? What was Larry hitting? It was astounding.
Frank, what were you going to offer?
He was hitting 246. He signed
know
out with the Mets and hit 105 for the Mets.
I remember you with the Mets. Yeah.
Because I used to make trips to Chicago like once a year to catch a couple games, and I don't remember if it was '85, but one of those years, you remember how the Cubs parking lot used to just be behind a chain link fence along the left field wall,
the player parking lot, because there was no such thing as a fan parking lot.
Parking lot. No. Right, the player parking lot. So you could see the players going to their cars and the whole bit, and we were walking by. And Scott Sanderson came out, and he was walking over to his car. And a lot of the Cubs, they had some deal going with a car dealer where they do some grip and grins or something, and they'd get a loaner car for the season, and they'd have dealer plates on them. And I don't know if it's still the case, but I know that in Illinois back then, dealer plates had a DL designation on them.
Like in Fargo.
So like DL along the left column. And so Sanderson's walking to his car, and I could see he had the dealer plates. I was like, hey, Sandy, you're on the DL so much they gave you special plates? Yeah, he didn't get any support from his teammates. They were all laughing.
Nah, you're right, because they're probably pissed off. Really, Scott? What is it this time?
I was going to tell the same. I'm sure I told this story in the '85. Remember this crap, but no, I distinctly remember that late in the year, before the Cubs finally gave up on Larry, he started wearing glasses.
Yes.
And Harry was like, "Oh, look at this, wearing glasses, Steve. I'll bet the ball looks like a beach ball to him now." And he struck out. And I just so much wanted Steve to go, "Well, Harry, he can't hit a beach ball either."
Well, fortunately, they got what they could get out of Larry Boa, and they got Ryan Sandberg. So, I got nothing bad to say about Larry Boa's Cub tenure.
Oh, you should listen to us more often then.
Yeah, that's a little piece of shit.
Larry Boa did collect over 2,000 major league hits, believe it or not. He did it before he joined the Cubs.
I didn't know he batted 10,000 times.
But yeah, at one point, wasn't the entire rotation on the DL at the same time?
That's what Andy said.
Yeah,
at one point, they just needed Sanderson to show them the way. Which way's the DL?
They got 4 starts out of Jay Baller, 8 out of Steve Engel, 7 out of Derek Bathello, Reggie Patterson made 5, and Johnny Abrego made 5. Oh, and Larry Gurra made 4 starts for him.
And of course,
that should have made up for it. Look at that. That's a murderous
Larry
road.
Gurra, the prodigal Cub.
Oh, I've talked about it before, is that like one of my memories is like watching an NBC game of the week where Larry Gurra, who I believe was the 1980 American League Cy Young Award winner when he took the Royals to the World Series before losing to Dallas Green's Phillies. And I remember hearing stories, he used to pitch for the Cubs in the 70s. And then he comes back and just like he could not get off the mound. It was just dreadful. Just 85 was so bad. And you mentioned Steve Engel, all those guys like making their major league debuts. It was it turned to dust so fast. It was almost breathtaking.
No wonder Jim Frey hated the farm system so much that he blew it up himself.
Right.
They sabotaged my 85 season. Larry Gurra won 18 games in 1980 and finished 6th in the Cy Young balloting.
So,
then just 3 years later, he led the American League with 18 losses.
Yeah.
You got to be pretty good to lose 18 games.
Yeah.
Turns out Larry proved he didn't, really. Yes, he finished his career with the Cubs with those 4 starts. He pitched in 5 games. He was 0-3 with a tidy 8.41 ERA.
Yeah. The 1980 American League Cy Young was everybody's favorite visibility.
Oh, Stoney. Yeah, 25-game winner. How did I blow that?
How's the
That's what you do.
Yeah, Gurra just barely led the Royals, the expansion Royals to the series. Yeah, Stoney won 20. Second to last guy to win 25.
Yeah, he wrecked his arm throwing nothing but curveballs at you.
Correct.
So the
I was
just going to say, so the Cubs, their brief flirtation with excellence in 1984.
Yeah.
They would not finish 500 again until the miracle 1989 Cubs.
Which, as we've discussed, should have been a not dynastic, but at least a perennial contender.
Yeah, it should have set up a long run of competence. Instead, they wouldn't win. They wouldn't finish 500 again until 1993.
Yes, and that was not a collapse.
When everybody had Lefevre fever.
93 was again, for us kids, Fork, that like were born in 71, 70, both born in 72, I believe. The 93 Cubs team was the first team in our lifetime to finish 500 and not make the playoffs. Because there had only been two. I mean, yeah, I get technically 73, 74 were over 500, but that was,
they
for
just
73
missed the
was
playoffs.
we were never.
They were finished fourth.
They didn't. Yeah. They only finished 500 because a mediocre team got hotter than hell in September. Try to save Lefevre's job. Didn't even work.
So the 1993 NL East, the Phillies won 97 games, the Expos won 94, and the Cardinals won 87. But how about this? So, oh my God, think about how many bad teams there were, and there were a lot. Because over in the West, the Braves, how about in the West? The Giants won Dusty's Giants won 103 games and didn't make playoffs.
That's right. That's when we decided it was time for a wild card.
So that year, the Marlins.
Well,
was
it already
the
been
first
decided.
year of the Marlins?
Yes. Marlins
lost,
and Rockies, 93.
They lost 98 games. The Mets lost 103.
Yeah.
The Rockies lost 95, and the Padres lost 101.
Well, we talked about it, too. The Rockies and the Marlins were expansion teams in 93. And Dusty, of course, in his first season with San Fran, won 103 games and didn't make the playoffs because he didn't win his division, and he lost by one game. And it was the first time in baseball history that one team failed to record a victory over another team, and it was when the Braves swept the Rockies for the entire season, including like the last day of the season. So Dusty just couldn't buy a break in 93.
Yeah, there was 1 year, maybe 74, where the Cubs went 1-11 against the Reds.
Okay.
The Cubs were in danger. 74, 75, one of the big red machines.
That's right. But it never otherwise happened. Obviously, it would never have happened before 69 because you're playing each other, God knows how many times. But yeah. Andy, did you unearth something else, or just laughing at the historical ineptitude of the 74 Cubs going 1-11 against the Reds?
No, I was just laughing at Mitch Trubisky frantically trying to make sure the Bears get the number
You're
one
watching
pick
the
by
game.
losing to the Patriots.
Yes.
Which is finally paying off.
That's great. I'm not even watching that game. That's awesome. Yeah, so 93, not a collapse, but an unusual team that finished over 500, doesn't make the playoffs, but they were never in position to collapse because they just got hot late to save Riggleman's job.
Only won 49 games.
Yeah.
Then again, the season ended.
Right.
Far
and then
prematurely. They only lost 64.
And then 93, 95, also not a collapse. And then also the second time now that they went 500 but didn't make the playoffs, but the opposite of a collapse because, as we discussed, they had, because of the strike in 94 and trying to realign the schedule, they had a quirk where their last 14 or 15 games were at home, and they almost fucking pulled it off. And they didn't because they were mediocre.
One of my roommates was very upset when the Cubs fired Jim Lefevre after the 93 season. Couldn't believe that you could fire a manager after he finally got you over 500. And then, of course, but that set up the wonderful Tom Trebelhorn era where he got on a soapbox in front of a firehouse. And,
yes.
But that his ill-fated one season in the sun led to the Jim Riggleman era, one of the rare Cub managers to last 5 seasons. And the first year of the Riggleman era was the never say die 95 Cubs.
Great team.
Who just kept not getting eliminated in like the last, I'm going to look it up here, how many days of the season. They were hanging on by a thread and they just wouldn't lose from...
kind of the opposite of a collapse, frankly.
So 95 is the... is that the year the Brewers changed leagues? Is that right?
No, that was until 98.
Oh, 98. Okay. So nothing happened in 95 other than we had a lockout.
Other than it was 94 is supposed to be the first year of realignment. So the Rockies and Marlins joined in 93 with the 4 division format. 94 was actually the first year of the 6 division format. but the strike we didn't see it. So 95 was the first year we got to see the wild card in baseball and shit.
Okay.
Which is
that's
funny
right.
because the 95 Cubs,
because that's what the Cubs were hanging on to. Because
the 95 Cubs would have won the old NL East in 95 because all the teams that made the playoffs were old NL West teams.
Yeah, fucking realignment screwed them.
Right. The Rockies made it, the Braves made it, the Reds made it, and the Dodgers made it.
Because on Friday, September 22nd, the Cubs are 66 and 69, and they're 15 games out of first place. And then they wouldn't lose again until the 30th of September. They won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in a row, including with the Astros just trying to eliminate them. They beat them the first 2 games in a 4-game series on walk-offs.
Yeah.
Then they lost their last 2 games and had to go home.
I was at the Saturday game. They jumped out that one too. It was never say die.
Yeah, they lost 9. The 2 games they lost at the end of the season, they lost 9-8 and 8-7.
Yeah, crazy. Just crazy.
We're like, here
baseball
we go.
Was back.
Look, we got something here. This our skinny little manager, looking all handsome in the corner of the dugout.
Well, yeah, I said this the other time.
We got skinny little manager now, so
that's right. Even skinnier. Riggleman's like proportion.
Yeah, that 95 team was like the dog that kept rallying on its last ride to the vet, so they kept going.
It was fun. Yeah. Yeah, they have a special place in all our hearts. They're not, a real team, not a real contender. Right. They were the strike played into it. It does lead into the next season, though. By the way, that 1996 was the year I moved to Chicago. So all of a sudden, I'm going to like 20 games. So I have a lot of distinct memories of games in which I probably didn't black out. But I insist on putting this team in the collapse because they were otherwise just typically Tribune-esque mediocre from beginning to end, except this is Riggleman's second season now. You got Sammy Sosa, who broke his wrist on August 1st when Mark Hutton hit him. He had a 40-homer season. They had, Jaime Navarro had a nice year. They were mediocre, but somehow they couldn't quite. And they never were. I don't consider them a truly contending team. I just want to point to the game on Tuesday, September 17th. The Cubs are 5 games out, so they're done. You would think, but they're chasing the Cardinals, and you never know. You can sweep the Cardinals, right? And I remember watching this game in my new apartment in the city. Spent a whole summer going to Cubs games, wasting my money, my own money, a real job, blah, blah, blah. This game's in Busch, and it's Donovan Osborne. And I forget who's pitching for Frankie Castillo the year before that near no-hitter. I only point to late in the game, though, because Ryan Sandberg had come out of retirement. He was neither of our favorite player, Andy, but he was the greatest player that we saw as kids, like his whole career. And he retires unexpectedly, comes back and has this weird season where he hits one of the years he hits a lot of homers and he doesn't hit for average or whatever, but like he's only showing flashes. But the game is 1-1. First game of the series. Cubs are 5 games out. Top of the 8th inning. Grace gets a hit and fucking old ass Ryan Sandberg hits a 2-run homer. Cubs go up 3-1. Get out of the inning. You're better at reading those box scores than me because I'm almost overcome with just disappointment because I was like sitting on my couch going, they're going to do it. I know they're 5 back on September 16th, but holy shit, there's Sandberg. That's like, it's going to happen. And then what happens in the bottom of the 8th? Another legend on the other asshole.
So the bottom,
answers.
Bottom of the 8th, Riggleman leaves Castillo in, so he's still pitching. And Mike Gallego singles to left. But then he gets Royce Clayton to fly out. So now the wheels are spinning and wheels are turning in Riggleman's head, and he goes to his lefty, Bob Patterson, who was busy in the bullpen fixing everybody's gloves. He gives up back-to-back triples.
Yeah, I know, but who is Bob Patterson being brought into face?
Talk
about some old balls.
Ozzie Smith.
Who never
and
was
that's
a hitter.
the move, right? You make Ozzie bat left-handed. You only ever just hit the one fucking homer left-handed, right? The one off Tom Niedenfuhr in the playoffs. Is that the only one he ever hit?
Yes.
Is that the only one of like 6 that he ever hit? That's like a literal thing. Like he never did it. He triples.
I'm pretty sure it was his first one, actually.
Ray Langford follows up and he triples. So Gallego scored on the first one to make it 3-2, and then Ozzie scores on the next one. So now it's time to bring in the great Turk Wendell. And he gets Ron Gant to ground out. So we're like, okay, well, it's tied. We'll get out of this. We'll score in the night. It'll be fine. And then Brian Jordan, why not? The safety from the Falcons.
Right. Two-way player.
Hits a 2-run homer. And
yeah,
they're down 5-3 in the ninth.
I think.
And in comes former Cub Dennis Eckersley to nail the door down, and he does.
His old ball, and he is totally at the end of his line. So I think earlier that season, Robin Jennings had beaten him on a walk-off at Wrigley on the hit. He was LaRusso. This is LaRusso's first year as the Cardinals manager. They would go to the playoffs. They would actually come within one game of the World Series. They were up 3-1 to the Braves.
Yeah, and then
then
they had to beat Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz.
Correct, which is like the math. But my point is that this is like the team that the mediocre Cubs find them. So this is why I consider this. It's a small collapse, but I consider it a collapse because it's kind of a mediocre team. But you know what? They hadn't gotten eliminated. It's mid-September, and there's a chance. This is the first of a 3-game series, and all of a sudden, your old middle infielder legend, like blasts a 2-run homer. It's like, holy shit! Like, what's going on here? And then their old middle infielder legend, like, although you're right, Ozzie, that didn't tie the game. They needed Langford to do it, but that was it. It's so like the whole season, as far as the Cubs were in contention for like 45 minutes in 1996, and it was as soon as Sandberg homer, and after
that loss was their third in a row. It dropped them under 500, 74 and 74.
So they were losing coming into that game. Okay.
And they would play 14 more games, and they would win 2 of them the rest of the season. So they finished that season 2-14. And then do we remember how they started the 1997 season?
Frank, any recall?
Yeah, didn't they lose a bunch of games? And wasn't that the year that Eric Young couldn't win?
Nope. But they did lose a bunch of games. 0-14, you might recall.
Right.
So the last 16 games of the 96 season, the first 14 games of the 97 season, the Cubs went 2-28. And Jim Riggleman managed for how many more seasons?
The rest of 97, and then 98, and then 99. Yeah.
It's good that standards are so high.
Hey, look how long we had to write out David Ross.
Well, 5 seasons. No Cub manager has managed more than 5 seasons since Leo, by the way. So in our lifetime, it's never happened. Ross merely tied Riggleman in Madden. But yeah, as far just to put the 96 Cubs to bed and further justify my insistence that they be included in the collapses, for that 45 minutes when between Sandberg hitting that homer and then Ozzie answering and the rest of them, and then losing the next going 2-14 after or in the midst of that that mediocre team, but they qualify as a collapse. But it is interesting to know next season they go in and they go 0-14. So notable because that would be part of a larger Jim Riggleman grouping, right, Andy?
Yeah. So
which will lead us to our final collapse. Yes. I can tell Frank's getting tired because he's old and shit. So we're almost there.
Well, and he's an hour ahead of us too. So
yeah,
even tireder.
And I donated platelets today, so.
Oh.
That's right.
Good for you.
He's, donating platelets and fucking having to rehash all this shit. That's like
it's hazardous to your health.
He needs a Purple Heart.
Obviously the 98 Cubs had that ridiculous season. I don't know if you guys heard Kerry Wood struck out 20 guys in a game.
Get out.
They have video of that?
Yeah, Sammy hit 66 home runs. Stuff happened that year. So they come back in 99, and they're going to build on that success. And let's see,
Honestly, it's a lot like 85. The 99 Cubs, a lot like 80. Same thing, like, although,
they were 9 games over on June 8th, but they were never a factor in their division. They weren't in first place in the division after April 9th.
Oh, okay.
But let's see.
Sounds like I have a better argument for 96.
On June 8th, they were. Where were they in the wild card, though? Well, they had the 3rd best record in the National League on June 8th. They were the wild card team. Only Houston, who was just a game ahead of them, had a better record. So here we go. We're in good shape. The magic of the year before is taking place.
Right. Even though they trot Gary Gaetti's old balls out to the hot corner,
which was a brilliant idea. A guy you got off of waivers. Literally, that's a guy.
Even though
he's 49
Scott
years
Sanders,
old, bring him back.
Right. Yeah, and even though it's like Scott Sanders and Brad, where was the other guy? Yeah, Brad Woodall were like in your opening day, like your first week's rotation. Maybe I couldn't see the signs again. But they were 9 over in June, and it kind of felt like you still had Sammy. They were, yeah, not really though.
Let's see. So that June 9th game in Arizona.
Was that the year that Souza had almost as many home runs as the rest of the Cubs combined?
That'd be 2001 probably. We just talked about that with Mike. Because
Okay.
he did have 87 more RBIs than the next closest guy, which was Ricky Gutierrez, I think it was. Yeah. Sammy's 01 season. Something else.
These are all names for the sidewalk outside the ballpark. Ricky
Right.
Gutierrez.
Fucking A. But 99 was his second consecutive 60 homer season. I mean, they had Sammy. I mean, I think Henry wasn't quite as effective. I can't even, like, offhand. They probably still had Blauser's contract with Trot and Gaetti out there. Kerry Wood blew his arm out in spring. He wasn't even there at all.
He blew his arm out. They brought him back too soon for the playoffs in 98.
So on the their high water mark was the 8th of June, and on the 9th they lost a nail biter, 8-7 to the Diamondbacks.
Right. They almost came back
against
on
Randy Johnson.
Yeah.
They're down 8-1 in the 8th. And here's what happened in the 8th. Sammy greets Randy in the 8th with a home run. Then Glenn Allen Hill doubles. Mickey Morandini triples. Henry Rodriguez walks. Benito Santiago singles, scores Mickey. So then they bring in Byung-Hyun Kim. And Grace flies out. Tyler Houston doubles, scores Henry Rodriguez. Roosevelt Brown strikes out. Then Manny Alexander is up. And Byung is so intimidated by Manny, he throws a pass ball, scores a run. Scores a run. And then Manny singles to cut it to 1. And there are 2 on for Sammy with a chance to give him the lead. And what do you think Sammy does?
Struck out.
Sammy struck out. And the Cubs lost. And that was no ordinary loss. The Cubs were, going into that game, they were 32-23.
Why did I think that game ended on Lance Johnson getting picked off at first?
That was a different game. That happened maybe the next day?
Okay, my bad.
No. I don't know when that happened. That was Arizona, though, right?
I thought so. Whatever.
By the way, listeners, jot these names down for your ultimate grid or immaculate grid.
That's right. Lance Johnson for sure, because I believe he was a Cardinal, he was a White Sox, he was a Met. Andy and I unearthed that one year for the Mets he led the league in hitting, or he had led the league in hits.
He had one really good year for the
Mets.
Yeah. One dog.
So that loss, the Cubs had won 2 in a row and they got to 9 over. They would lose 11 of their next 12. And then if you, let's see, we zip ahead all the way until, where am I going here? If you go down all the way to Tuesday, Don't want to do that. Sunday, September 12th. Between the June the 9th and September the 12th,
Yes.
the Cubs went 24-54. They played 30 games under 500 in a 78-game span. It was the second time under Jim Riggleman that they had a flurry of games where they finished 30 where they were 30 games under 500.
Which I think is a perfect way to end. Remember this collapse. Discussing these last two sort of mouse farts of collapse, they were nowhere near as epic as 69 or 2019 or this year. They were mediocre teams, but they also represent. They're both encompassed in these two separate eras, where, as you say, the Cubs went 30 games under 500 in a half a season under the same manager, like two collapses, as it were. In one regime. So if nothing else, I think that might be the ultimate testament to Jim Riggleman's time as the Cubs. Took him to the playoffs once and encountered like two breathtaking collapses. With you're not going to get more than two. It was the second one that cost him his job finally, but not before the motherfucker put 5 years in, which puts him up there with Joe Madden and David Ross.
Right, and Ross in 21, Ross was one Frank Schwindel, I think it was a game-winning double away from being the first manager in baseball history to preside over 3 10 or more game losing streaks in the same season. That win broke up the Cubs lost 14 out of 15. But the Frank's win was parked right in the middle of that, and it kept it from happening to Dave.
Oh.
And they didn't all happen after the sell-off. The first two happened before it.
Right. They caused the sell-off.
Yes. So I think this will be easy. So the thing we did at the end of the other version of this, we compared which was worse, this most recent collapse or these other years.
Yep.
So 1969, what was worse, the 1969 collapse or the 2023 collapse? I think this one's pretty easy.
Don't have to answer that one.
The most famous collapse in Cubs history, probably.
Even though Frank was right, but we sussed it out too, because sometimes the myth can become more powerful than the truth. But yeah, certainly by comparison, there's no comparison.
Well, the whole city of Chicago had pennant fever, and
true,
it was great.
So, okay.
I mean, the one of these collapses that is probably the most similar to. At least shares the trait with the 69 would be the 19 collapse, only because while the 19 Cubs didn't, or the 18, which isn't even really a collapse because they made the playoffs, while they played okay down the stretch, the Brewers wouldn't lose, which was but the Mets one is epic compared to that. It went on for half a season. They just wouldn't lose.
Well, that's what we agreed upon amongst the latter group, is which one was the most 2023, and we agreed it was 2019 because it was a kind of a mediocre team that all of a sudden was there at the end and then wasn't. So if you throw in the ones we discussed tonight, which one is the most 2023 amongst this group? Does that make certainly not 69 because
not 69 because they're too good to be compared to them.
So I would
70. So what we got? We got 69, 77, 85, 99,
and 96. So
96.
I would actually go with 96 only because it was late season, but
yeah, because the thing with
they weren't that close to actually making it though in 96. I mean, the 23 Cubs literally let one slip through their fingers in the last 3 days of the season. It was
right.
That's true.
It wasn't that anybody took it from the Cubs. The Cubs gave it away.
Yeah.
In 23.
Yep.
And
there's nothing in the seasons we discussed tonight that would actually compare to that. 77 was too far gone. 69 they were out of it. 85 they were hurt and bad.
69 and 23 kind of had the same root cause, which is, Leo and Ross both went to the whip with the same guys over and over and over and over again. And,
I wouldn't say root cause, but definitely had some similarities there.
Yeah. But, the Mets were just so good.
Yeah, so I guess even factoring the other one.
You could say that the 23 Cubs got caught by the team that went to the World Series, the Diamondbacks. But the Diamondbacks, they won 84 games. They mainly made the playoffs because they beat the Cubs 6 out of 7 times in the last month. So it's the Cubs' own damn fault. So that doesn't compare.
Yeah.
77 doesn't fit. 85 was a follow-up to a really good team that everybody got hurt.
Yeah.
99 was the follow-up to a fluky, fun team, but
right.
I don't think any of us went in with huge expectations at 99 that they were going to actually.
So the one most like 23 is 19, which the only unanswered question is which is the worst, which I think obviously tonight is 69, and that compares to 04.
Yeah.
Right? What's a worse collapse, Frank? We're going to put it to you because I don't know.
Yeah, 2004 or 1969.
I know you weren't on the episode, but you fucking lived it, obviously. You were there. Yeah. You know, you can imagine what we talked about. You can listen to it. Like, I mean, that team was as talented as that 69 team was, right? And we did they were, even with Nomar down the stretch, they added Hesop Choi and Derek Lee from a team that, even though they won 88 games, only came within a breath of the series. And even though Wood and Pryor were both a little bit banged up, they had, they didn't have a bullpen, whatever. Not getting into the Achilles heel. Let's talk about the fact that, and even after St. Louis ran by them, they were firmly in the grasp of a spot with 2 weeks to go. And
I think the difference between 04 and 69 was 04, we still had the snake venom in us from 03.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
And 69, there was none of that. It was all the
69 was the snake bite.
Right. So, that was what established the Cubs collapsing, the whole legacy of collapsing Cubs teams. Because before then, they were either good enough to win the pennant or they were terrible and didn't matter.
Yeah.
69 was that first year where they took their run, fell apart, and then just every collapse since 69 has been compared to 69. Whether it was better than 69, worse than 69, whatever, Sure. But so for me, 69 is the one.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. I mean, we sussed it out. As much as I've complained about the long-term psyche, it's obviously there for a reason. And I think for a lot of the reasons went into just to try the psychic.
It's the reason why Rajai Davis had to hit that fucking home run, because we had to have that one last moment.
I literally had that conversation with a neighbor the other night and saying, another Cub fan. I was like, I went to Game 4 with my dad. Got to take him to the World Series game. That's the game Lackey lost. They're down 3-1. We're walking out of the ballpark. We're like, well, at least they made the series, right? And I think about it in retrospect. I'm like, yeah. And had they lost the next night in Game 5, then whatever. To have lost is one thing, but to have lost after being down 3-1, then winning Game 5, then blowing them out in Game 6, and then leading all the way in Game 7, and then losing.
Yeah,
I don't know that any of us would be able to handle it.
No.
I just don't know. I mean,
but it is funny. There are still Cub fans who are like pissed off about the Rajai Davis homer, and it's like, get over it. It was. It ended up being like it. Now it's almost like we needed it,
right?
Because we saw them blow it again like we always had, but this time they came back.
Was it supposed to be easy? Fuck no. It's just like Boston having to be the first team to come down from 3-love.
I was thinking that when I watch the World Series video every year, and there's Ben Zobrist says, we knew it wouldn't be easy, but we didn't think it would be this hard.
Right. And for us to go through it, I'm fine with it. Like, I can't imagine, like, Rajai, you laugh about it. You also realize that if Rajai wasn't in center field, they might not score those early runs because that flat-footed motherfucker kept not being in position to steal the game off a little bit. So, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, we talk. To me, the thing that saved the World Series was in the top of the 9th, David Ross walked, and they pinch ran for him, which meant Miguel Montero caught the bottom of the 9th, which meant Aroldis didn't just throw fucking fastballs,
right?
And he actually got through the inning. And then they got to the rain delay, and then they got through it because Ross, and we've documented this, every pitch or roll that's threw to him in the playoffs was a fucking fastball. Every one. You got to be kidding me.
And when Montero was in there, you could see that Cleveland was just sitting heater, and Montero kept calling sliders. Yep. So.
And then there's the great Montgomery comes in to get the last out, and he's shitting his pants. As you know, was kind of expected. The only save he ever got in his big league career was in Game 7 of the World Series, and he basically tells Miggy, he's like, I didn't throw my curveball for a strike in the bullpen, and Miggy turns, doesn't even look at him, and on his way to the plate goes, we'll figure it out. And they called the first two called 2 curveballs, and the second one was grounded to Bryant, and the Cubs won the World Series. So,
but let's not forget that Madden managed that game to make Francona make substitutions that allowed for him to have an outfielder who couldn't throw Albert Almora out at second base.
Rajay. Again, he was flat-footed. I know he was on the warning track. The other thing, earlier in that game, I've said it before, is like, do you remember when Bryant tagged up from third on an Addison Russell shallow pop fly to Rajay? Mm-hmm. And it was a high throw, and but Rajay caught it flat-footed and made a high throw. And then also, Wilson Contreras, with the other catcher in the game, well, you might recall Wilson had that big double, but it was a high fly. Mm-hmm. It kind of bounced on the warning track in right center. I was like, really good center fielder might catch it. I saw Rajay, there are 3 plays in that game.
Well, Rajay's playing, partially why Rajay's playing center is, remember in Game 6, who the hell was the guy who played center? The big white guy. Him and the left fielder got confused and let Russell's ball drop for a double. It was an out, and they let it drop.
It was a 3-run double.
Yeah.
So
kind of makes all those collapses worth it, right, Frank?
Yep. And since I wasn't on the 2001 episode, I must say, McStiff eats ass.
Fucking A, bro.
Well, you will enjoy that. You read it, and I read at one point. I read from the moment the Cubs were eliminated to the end of the season. I read Fred's stats, and you will not be surprised at how amazing they are.
Oh yeah, after they get eliminated.
As soon as it didn't mean anything, that motherfucker hit like you wouldn't believe. So his stats look great. So people look at it like, oh, he was a good pickup. No, he was not.
Oh God, and that fucking 30 home runs with 6 different teams nonsense.
Yeah. Which he did though too, for a team that after he got off to a horrible start in April, and then he finished up with it. So it was like both sides of it. Warms up at the end of the season after they get eliminated, starts out cold and they get buried, and then it's the same thing. So
that assholes in Cooperstown.
Yeah. Hey Frank, one of these days we're gonna have to do a history of Cubs catchers, and would be remiss if we didn't have you on for that one. So
I think I've suggested that do a RTC position by position.
No, we will.
Yeah, we've already done. We've done center fielders. We did one center field. So far.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sure you approve though.
Yeah.
I think with center field, we came down to the greatest center fielder in hit. I think Hack Wilson is in the discussion, even though he was a fire plug that could only hit. I mean, he's responsible for kind of blowing the 29 World Series, but that's what we're left to. That's how weak it is. So yeah.
Well, and I mean, in my lifetime, Adolfo Phillips was okay. Rick Monday, simply by tenure.
Well, even by today's standards, Monday is the last center fielder to even have just 4 seasons of 135 starts in center.
Yeah. Fowler was only here for 2 years,
and Fowler's in the 1 or 2 only because of the confluence of the World Series and all the shit that he did. That's all it took for him to be considered pretty much the best center fielder in the last 70 years.
So now we get to find out if Pete Crow is the real McCoy.
Yeah, if September's any indication.
Let's hope we don't have to find out if Pete is the real thing until 2020.
No, Pete Crow. Sutcliffe decided that his name was Pete Crow. Pete Crow, not Pete Crow Armstrong, but Pete Crow Armstrong. So he kept saying, "Oh, Pete Crow's got a lot of speed out there." I love Rick Sutcliffe. He's so horrible.
He's the worst. It's a good thing that we, he's trying to wear out the goodwill. He's trying very, very hard, and he can't. He's not going to be able to do it. We're still gonna like him, but it's like, come on.
But what it is he's the new Ron Santo. He is our drunkle.
Interesting. I like that.
He's the drunkle who's gonna just pull for the Cubs, and there's gonna be malapropisms and
be a bit of a mascot, huh?
Tell us how amazing Ian Happ looked in batting practice.
Yeah, and how Billy Williams just wanted to go on a golf cart and hear Brennan Davis hit the ball. But
he can still do that in Des Moines anytime he wants.
But the funny thing is every so often he'll have that moment of clarity. He had this great analysis. It's like 2 years ago, but it sticks in my mind because it's great analysis from Rick Sutcliffe, where Albert Alzolay, every time when he was a starter, every time a guy would get on base, he would stop trusting his stuff, and he would get too cautious once he gave up a hit. And he talked about it, and I was like, this is unbelievable. Where did this? I understand. Rick Sutcliffe is a great pitcher, so he obviously knows about pitching. Yeah. I'm just not used to hearing it come out of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he usually can't he can't access the knowledge on the broadcast usually, which is unfortunate.
So now we're left with Pete Crow.
Yeah. It is funny though. When did he finish pitching for the Cubs? 90?
His last season was 91, I believe, 91? Because he helped open up. He and Dave Otto helped set a mark for opening up a new ballpark in Camden Yards by throwing a whole bunch of consecutive shutout innings when he was with the. Who did he go to? He pitched for the Orioles, right?
Yeah, the Orioles and then the Cardinals. And, is that it?
Otto's pitching for the Indians. Yeah.
Yep. So basically, I mean, you start to figure out baseball when you're like, charitably when you're 7 or 8, right? People who are 40 never saw him pitch for the Cubs, and the marquee still throws him out there like, he's going to appeal to half their viewers. They're like, who is this rambling asshole?
Well,
we know who he is. That doesn't mean they do.
At least Marquis shows games in which he pitched, unlike Ernie Banks playing shortstop. So,
well, it was funny when I was still living in Evanston. And Marquee launched. They were doing the Marquee mystery games and all that, which I love.
It was the same 4 games. How many times can we watch the 96 opener against the Padres?
How was that game?
But it was fun at the beginning because one of the things was I always tried to guess the year and then guess why are they showing us this game. But they had a couple of games where Sutcliffe just threw gems.
Yeah.
Sure. And for my wife, who became a Cub fan through me when we moved to Chicago, she had no familiarity with Sutcliffe, no familiarity with Andre Dawson, and watching some of these games on Marquee, she's like, wow, I really like Rick Sutcliffe. Wow, I really like Andre Dawson. It's like, they rule.
That's one of my big complaints with them is they supposedly have this entire library of games.
Yeah.
Show them. Like, I get irritated. They show Harry's last game all the time. Show like one of his first ones when he was really good. Like, you don't have to, we don't need, post-stroke Harry that much because you supposedly have this vault of games where he's in his prime and where he's really good. It's like I wrote about Andre Dawson, so I have to put the Luis Salazar, the game winner against the Cardinals in there when Andre scores from first. And Fells is like, it's so nice to hear Harry. Like that's Harry is all over it. It's like they have supposedly they have this whole vault of that. Use it. Like maybe some of your younger fans will understand why people love Harry because he was so good. He wasn't just this weird, slurring, Ryan Dempster impression. It's
just to close the loop on it. Prez asked us the other night because that motherfucker was born in 1994.
Yeah.
But like, what was our take on Jack Brickhouse? And like, Frank would have immediate memories. He was He was not a fan in our household, and I remember like because I wasn't really like trained to learn, tune into Channel 44 and learn about Harry. I didn't know about him until like my brother was throwing pitches in the backyard, and he's like going, big swing and a miss. And I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh, that's the White Sox announcer, Harry Carey. I'm like, wow, he sounds like fun. It was a lot more fun than who we got. So we got Harry. I was like I was 10 years old when Harry came to the Cubs. I was pumped. And he lived up to it because he was not. Yeah, and like I don't know what your take would be on Brick. I'm sure you were not horribly fine. He was there. He was more of a WGN guy. He was there forever and whatever. But like, yeah.
Every time Oscar Zamora would come into pitch, hey, we're gonna get Zamora. And every time Dennis Lamp, it's dark and wriggly, but we got a lamp on the mound.
That sounds more like Steve Stone than anything.
No, that was Brick House.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, with the awful puns.
Yeah.
But the Stone puns are like tongue in cheek, right?
And mispronunciation of Spanish names. So you had Jesus Alou and
less generational. But Harry didn't do that. He would just accuse them of like, how do you lose a fly ball in the sun from Latin America?
Or what was one guy speaks Spanish and one guy speaks Mexican? That was one of Harry's. Well, they can't really understand each other. One of them speaks Spanish, the other one speaks Mexican.
Oh God, Harry was so great before the story. I mean, he would just he would give Sandberg a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. He was like, us, right? Like when the shit went sideways, Harry wasn't going to pretend that it wasn't.
He's $7 million a year, and he pops it up.
Well, yeah, he would. I use Jody Davis as an example. He literally sings Jody to the Davy Crockett dude. But then I swear Jody was the one guy that frustrated. Like, get up. I feel like it was like when Jody was batting more than anything.
I mean, and if you think about it, that's the way. Like, that's how it should be. Like, when they did something great, Harry was excited. When they did something bad, he was like us. He was like, oh. I mean, unless you were Ken Boyer, who he just fucking hated. I mean, it's legendary that he hated fucking Ken Boyer, and he couldn't say anything nice about Ken Boyer ever. And,
is that right?
Yeah. It's Boyer.
Wow.
The 2 outs about, when Boyer pops up to second, I'll give you the final. I'll give you the totals.
Well, that's funny. What if the story was behind that?
I don't know. I'm sure it'll be something little and petty. I'm sure.
He hated Ken Boyer. Boyer didn't share the room to Gussie, the room key for Gussie Bush's wife.
Boyer probably saw Harry skipping out of Gussie's wife's room. That son of a bitch knows what I did.
What made it worse with Brickhouse was the older he got, the more he looked like a penis with glasses.
Yeah.
He even had the notch on top of his head.
Well, and it's bad. Milo liked him, so you know right away that that's bad. Milo Hamilton and you were pals. And
it was funny because Brickhouse did this whole passing of the torch in his last game with Milo. And the Sox hired Harry, and the Cubs hired him like the next day.
It is
great. Unfortunately, they couldn't bring Pearsall with.
No.
No, they brought him over later to be the outfield instructor.
Right. Yeah. So he could yell at Quincy Carter.
The weekend that they retired Ernie Banks' number. They retired his number on a Sunday. On that Saturday, they had
1982.
Yeah, they had an old timers game on that Saturday.
As much as Dallas Green was like building a new tradition, he was very quick to actually kind of honor those guys, believe it or not, because Banks was the first number to be retired in Green's first year.
The old timers game was just a show of Jose Cardinal and Jimmy Pearsall. They were just having a ball. They were having fun.
You came back you were there, right? I was
there that weekend. I came in specifically for the Banks number retirement. And Pearsall was playing center field. They had the Cubs legends against everybody else. So Pearsall's out there wearing a Boston uniform, playing center field. And he is making putouts. He was playing center field. I think he tagged Cardinal out at the plate at one point.
He ran all the way in, you mean?
He ran all the way in to tag Cardinal at the plate. It was great. And it was right after he got fired for saying ball players' wives were horny broads. So we were just
horny broads.
We were giving it to him all through the game.
You were in the bleachers?
Yeah, I was in the bleachers. We were just giving it to Pearsall. It was so much fun. And he was laughing through the whole thing because
Yeah. Well, he's like what? Like he's like a 50-year-old man, right? Probably at that point, if not pretty much. And he's like catching fly ball. He's like in great shape.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, because he was famous for jawing. I mean, right? Like he was just that character. He hits his 100th homer off a Dallas Green. He runs around the bases backwards, bullshit like that. Of course, he's not gonna like take offense, especially as an old timer in the bleacher. But I'm sure you guys didn't even punch softly, even though
Oh no!
Hey
Jimmy, we got some horny broads up here. Come up after the.
You don't recall any responses. He might have had a good retort or two.
He was just
laughing. A trained broadcaster.
The best response I ever heard from a player in the bleachers was Greg Luzinski. It was a day game. It was because Luzinski played for the Phillies long before lights.
Notre Dame graduate, Notre Dame and Niles. I mean, Chicago kid is what I was saying. Yeah.
Right. So, and one of the rules was always don't heckle Chicagoans, but this one guy just kept giving it to Luzinski the whole game. You're a bum, Luzinski. You're a bum. This went on for like 4 innings of him just yelling at Luzinski, calling him a bum. Finally, Luzinski just turned around and said, "If I'm a bum, how come I'm the one at work today?" So
that goes to Lee Elia.
So, on that note, guys.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Perfect.
This was a lot of fun. Yeah,
thanks for having me on.
As we do our positional Cubs, we will have you can come on to enlighten us more about Cubs.
Well, I could rhapsodize about Harry Cheedy.
Many of us have herpes.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. Got to congratulate the Dolan family.